2021. Hard for me to believe that we are into this new calendar year, and I am excited to be able to welcome our YouTube audience and the in-person patient audience and those of you who are on live stream around the campus for the Sunday chapel service as we begin the new calendar year. Really grateful to be with you. I thought I would start with a anecdote that's true that occurred to me happened to me just over this past weekend. My wife and I have a place where there's an intersection I know very well. We pulled up to the intersection and there's a crossover and there's a big yield sign. And Judy actually noticed it first. She said, "Oh my God, look at what happened there." And I looked over and I got out my camera and I took a picture of it because somebody had wiped out the yield sign. And I thought it was like hilariously funny. So I posted it on Facebook, and people were like, "Oh my God, are you okay?" And I was like, "No, I didn't wipe out the yield sign. I just thought it's funny that somebody failed to yield. And the yield sign had to yield because they didn't yield." So there's an irony there. Anyway, if you can make a connection there to acceptance, I'm probably done and we can just quit. So, but some of us have been unyielding. And I came into Alcoholics Anonymous really quite a long time ago. We'll talk a little bit more about that later, but really, really grateful to have continuous sobriety over a significant period of time. And when I first began my sobriety, AA was my mainstay, AA and Narcotics Anonymous. You're going to hear an NA reading later. Narcotics Anonymous and AA is really the sequence for me. I started more in NA and then gradually migrated to AA and other 12-step variants. Today there are lots of options for people in recovery. Recovery Dharma and Smart Recovery and various other sort of flavors of the recovery movements, but what I often am fond of saying is that do it alone anonymous doesn't work. So, but when I share, my testimony comes from my experience, and when I was early in the 12-step movements, there was, and I think still very much, there's a common attention to the word acceptance. And acceptance may mean different things to different people, and acceptance does mean different things in different situations. But I want to touch the topic because it's an important, persisting recovery theme. There is a very much loved AA pamphlet, little blue thing, that has acceptance as the cover. It was written by a guy named Vince Collins. It's funny if you get it, it looks like it was typed on a typewriter or like a mimeograph, and it's a sweet little thing that suggests that acceptance is the pathway to serenity and peace. And in the Alcoholics Anonymous Big Book, there's a story that is still in the current edition, Dr. Alcoholic Addict. I think when I was reading in the third edition, it's on page 449. I think it's now 417 or something. But anyway, on that particular page, the witness to his own recovery says that he believes acceptance is the answer to all his problems today. Now, that's a strong claim about acceptance. I think I'm not going to come on that strong. What I'd like to do is I'd like to spend a few minutes and talk about 3 different places where acceptance intersects with the recovery journey and possibly very much with you if you are a current Caron patient. So I'd like to point to places where acceptance could be really important and helpful. And there's 3 of them, and I'm just going to walk through. The first one is acceptance of the reality of your addiction. And that's a problem for many of us. Although acceptance alone is not the answer, it's acceptance plus response, right? It's what you do. I think I knew I was an alcoholic very young. I remember being in college, walking across the quad with a friend of mine, Jesse, and he said, "Jack, you and I are alcoholic." I don't remember what else he said because to me it was like the word went alcoholic. No one had really stuck the label on me until that particular moment. I don't know if Jesse's still alive or not, but something in my heart knew it was true. I would drink for another 10 years. I drank every day until age 28. And from about age 13, I was drinking or using some sort of substance. I used every day. And I came to acknowledge it, and accepting my alcoholism kept me drinking. So I'm not saying it's the only answer, but if you are here, take a look at your wrist and notice the wristband. It might be a clue that there's an issue. And people come here and they are concerned about where is the swimming pool, and I can't get my vegan favorite cookies and those kinds of things. And they make decisions about where they're going to go next in treatment because where the weather is going to be. When I was in cancer care in 2008, and my friends were telling me I should take alfalfa sprouts because it was really like there was some holistic thing that alfalfa was really good for bladder issues. And then I went to my doctor, and my doctor said, we're going to put you on a non-FDA approved protocol that is going to include interferon. It's likely to make you really sick. I was like, alfalfa or interferon? I hope you know, like there was no choice in the matter. It wasn't about preference. It wasn't about not wanting to be uncomfortable. So if you have not yet awoken to the reality that this is institutionalization, Narcotics Anonymous says very boldly and prophetically that we suffer from a continuing and progressive illness whose ends are always the same: jails, institutions, and death. That's a direct quote of the opening literature. You've already checked one of those boxes. One of my early friends in recovery, this woman named Iris, used to tell this story about herself when she would tell her story. God rest Iris' soul. Anyway, Iris said that she went to treatment at a place that is in southern Maryland, and she got there and she was forced there by her family that did an intervention. Her counselor said, hi, Iris, I've talked to your family and I want you to fill out this introductory questionnaire. This was before all the computer stuff and everything. 20 questions, very classic treatment, the 20 questions of Alcoholics Anonymous. And will you slide under my door and we'll meet again tomorrow? So she fills out the answers to this historic 20 questions. She comes into the counselor's office the next day and the counselor says, Iris, thanks for filling out your homework. I understand here you say, my children think I have a problem with alcohol. She said, well, my children do think I have a problem with alcohol. He says, I noticed on the 11th question, it says, have you ever been institutionalized because of your drinking? And she said, yeah. And he said, you put no. And she said, well, I haven't. And he said, well, where do you think you are? So this was a pivotal moment for Iris. And I'm not trying to be mean or flippant or dismissive or anything, but I do, one of my roles here at Caron is bereavement calls. So I make phone calls when families have lost loved ones who have been in our treatment here. And I feel like part of my mission here is to make sure that you hear the urgency and that you be very, very mindful if you're going to make weather and alfalfa sprouts and comfort and spa concerns what you worry about while you're here. Because many of you are fortunate to be able to be here today with the assistance of your insurance, and your insurance is concerned about medical necessity. And they have underwritten your care because they've determined that you're sufficiently sick that it warrants this level of dramatic intervention in your life. 28 days is an extraordinary intervention. That's like a massive amount of resources. And the staff-to-patient ratio here is unbelievably intensive care. And I would ask you to think about whether you have come to accept the gravitas of the circumstances that precipitated your arrival here. Have you figured it out? The neuroscientists would say you suffer from a brain dysregulation, which disrupts your capacity to make choices. That's a really important fact, that under the influence of alcohol, I was unable to make intelligent choices. My favorite illustration of this, Marty's sick of hearing it because I say it 20 times a year, is after my third DUI arrest. I said, that is it. No more driving at night. But that's an illustration of the brilliant mind gone awry. Because I'm not trying to brag, but I have an effective mind capable of doing lots of interesting little tricks, and I can solve algorithms, and I used to be able to do a Rubik's Cube and all that sort of stuff, but I could not figure my way out of that paper bag. And this is an important thing for you to accept. That's the first one. Second one. There will be a reading read by Sheila in a little bit from a woman named Marianne Williamson. And what she suggests at the beginning of the reading is that many of us think we are afraid because of inadequacy, sense of inadequacy. But that the deep fear that Marianne Williamson wants to call to our attention in this reading is a fear of our potency, of our capacity to be in the world. And I will tell you that in working for the last 12 years with Caron patients, one of the common denominators here is shame. I just could be challenged by my clinical supervision for having sort of shame blasted the audience by being very candid about your addiction. And I don't mean to do that. I do not mean to say, oh, you are bad people. My dear friend and mentor, Father Bill Holper, used to say, we are sick people trying to get well, not bad people trying to get good. And yet many of us come in with this, oh, I'm a bad person, kind of weight. And my wish for you is that in my second stop on the acceptance train here today, I could invite you to accept that you are a person of, actually, in my mind, infinite worth and value. That you are precious and absolutely worth all of whatever it's going to take. All the money, all the compromise, all the missed holiday expense, all of that heart and financial sort of sacrifice that's being made on your behalf is worth it because you are worth this. I am made to think of a woman who several years ago sat when my office was over here with me and said that she had to get home at Christmas because she had 3 kids and, how could she not be home for Christmas? And I pleaded with her to understand that she would have many more Christmases sober, and she died that year. She left, and she died that year. And she underestimated the value that she had in a tragic way, is what I'm saying also. She thought the value was like this Christmas. Well, what about the 50 that would have been ahead? I think the last name is Anderson, Brian Anderson, is that the right name? Equal justice writer. Anyway, there's a person who has been noted in the press in the last few years for saying how important it is for us to not measure ourselves by our worst moment. I will tell you, if I were defined by my worst moment, I would not be here. And if you think of me and you look at me, if some of you who are on YouTube or whatever know my backstory, and you're like measuring me by my worst moment, you're probably like, how is it possible that dude is still in that job? I was I like telling Jack's story. So I was sober a significant number of years. I was appointed as the pastor of a church in a community where I had been an active drinker and drug addict. And I had a church in an ocean block setting in a resort community. And one morning I came into the church and there was a pizza parlor napkin taped to the door of the church with pizza box marker writing on it. And it said, Jack, ? And then I opened the napkin and it said, oh my God, is this really you, Shannon, and a phone number. And I started laughing because I realized that Shannon, one of my drugging buddies, had pulled up in front of the church to go to the pizza parlor and seen it said Reverend Jack Abel, senior pastor, on the sign. And she was like, there is no way. Because she was measuring me by my worst moment. So I went upstairs to the office and I dialed the phone, and the phone picks up and it's Shannon. And I said, Shannon, it's Jack. And she goes, oh my God, it really is you. And I said, it really is me. She said, how? And I said, well, at that point, I guess it was, 13, 14 years into my sobriety. So I said, well, I got sober in 1989. And she said, I've been sober 7 years. And Shannon and I are still Facebook buddies. she saw me at one of my worst moments, certainly in my active addiction. The sad thing I will tell you, and I was making comments in the announcements before we started the video about, anyway, the point I was going to make is, even in recovery, we have bad moments. I was talking about relapse and people who are back for treatment, like trying to not be hard on yourself and just give this another go. Give your recovery another go. So I will tell you, some of my worst moments are sober moments when my conduct has been less than stellar, and I can't even use the excuse that I was drunk to sort of justify what has occurred. But I have to accept myself in order to walk as a person of dignity and worth. And I find that actually, and that's one of the reasons why I wanted to sing that song this morning, is that I believe that we as human beings are endowed with an inherent worth and value. And if I could give that to you, it would be my Christmas gift to each of you, is to remember that when you were born, there was someone, a mom, a dad, a caregiver, who looked at you as a precious child and saw the miracle of human life and just thought, oh, what a beautiful baby. And find that in yourself, and you still are. The third form of acceptance I wanted to talk about goes back to the yield sign comment that I started with, which was acceptance of wise counsel. I think it's very hard for many Caron patients and many of us in recovery, including this fellow right here, to take direction from others. I think we live in a climate and time in which the ego is championed, and that many of us, I'm not pointing any fingers at anyone except myself, but many of us have narcissistic features. I do. And so that means, like the psychologist teaches me, that means I'm not really good at empathizing and understanding like the world through other people's suffering when I make choices. And if I just remember my DUI solution, there's no more driving at night, like I need good counsel in order to navigate forward. I did a little research, and less than 10% of New Year's resolutions are kept into the middle of the year. In fact, January 12th is the death day of most New Year's resolutions. So, what would be the wise counsel? Because you came here, because someone, or you yourself, came here wanting to make a dramatic change in your life, right? You want to be able to mark a day and say, this is the day when my relationship with substances profoundly changed. And I can tell you, I can do that. I can mark a day in my life when my relationship with substances profoundly changed. But not by promising that I would stay sober forever. One moment at a time was the wise counsel that saved my butt. So when people told me that I could go to Alcoholics Anonymous, I could find a sponsor, I could learn a method of a new way of living, and that in the meantime what I should do is make sure I put my head on the pillow at the end of that day and not pick up a drink. That's what I did. That was the first instruction that I really took seriously. It was the single best piece of advice I've probably ever been given in my life. And the next day, I did it again. I went to an AA meeting and I started making new relationships, and I thought, you know what, I made it one day, put my head on the pillow and I didn't drink, and I made it another day. In May of 2017, I had made 10,000 days without a drink. One day at a time. So I'm actually discouraging anyone in the listening audience from thinking about their recovery in terms of New Year's resolution, because that's not a likely success strategy. I would encourage you instead to adopt a one day at a time approach. To adopt I am not going to drink or pick up or use under any circumstances today, and tomorrow when I wake up, I will seek to make that same intention. And then spiritual practice is this idea of renewing successful practice one day at a time. And even if you are back after a recurrence of your illness, just get back on that pony of the recovery trajectory. And people can and do sustain long-term recovery even after recurrence of illness. One of my treasured people in my life is a guy I sponsor. He was sober like 17 years, started smoking weed because he had all these like problems, and he thought the weed was going to help him with this certain circumstances. The next thing you know, he's precipitously drinking again. And he just celebrated 14 or 15 years again. So he's a person who had a stumble. And I sometimes think his recovery is stronger than mine, because you can see the deep way he learned the painful lesson from his difficulties. So, I suspect if you look in the rear view, you might see a couple of yield signs that you wiped out. But the real thing I would plead with you to do this morning is yield to wise counsel. That's what you're paying us for. Give us the right information to help us make an accurate assessment of where you are, and allow us to point you in the next step, next right thing direction. And accept that there's love and good intention and success we have an amazing track record of helping people make this extraordinary transition. And it could be you. I want it to be you. I deeply want it to be you. Sadly, I sometimes think you want it for you more than you want it for yourself. But please, accept that something brings you here. You're alcoholic and cannot manage your own life. Accept that you are a person of worth and value in a spiritual way that is mysterious and extraordinary. And accept that you need help. And let us provide it.